All right, let's stay with this story. With the interviews just hours away, let's discuss then the process as well as the prospects of success. Zikhona Ndlebe, a researcher at Judges Matter, joins us now. Zikhona, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, yesterday when I was in conversation with one interested party when it comes to this particular process, it was clear that the criteria is going to matter as much as these candidates as well when it comes to these particular interviews. I wonder, in your view, when it comes to the criteria and the setting of some of the questioning and how it should and shouldn't go, what would your advice be to the JSC?
So the first advice to the JSC would be that it has to have a set criteria, a criteria that is written down in black and white and that is known to everyone, especially to people that are going to be sitting before the JSC and be interviewed. Currently, there is no set criteria that we know of that is applied by the JSC. So that would be the first advice that I would give the JSC. And then in respect of the criteria that the JSC should have, the JSC should obviously look at Section 174 of the Constitution, which speaks to the qualification of the candidate, transformation, which speaks to race and gender, but also the criteria should also go beyond Section 174 and look at whether the person being interviewed, specifically for the position of a Chief Justice, is an intellectual leader, has produced high quality judgments, and is able to lead the apex court, the Constitutional Court, is able to lead the JSC itself, and is able to perform administrative functions which are necessary for the Chief Justice.
And some have said that the setting of the criteria, especially if it's written down for everybody to know which ambits, in fact, they should stick to, could also prevent what some have described as an ego-boosting exercise, where we've seen some questions that are deemed to be inappropriate being asked of these candidates. I wonder, in your view, could the setting of the criteria also give a sense of the line of questioning here?
Yes, it would definitely give a sense of the line of questioning, and it would prevent a situation this would be the same as that the one that we saw in April 2021, where candidates were bombarded with questions that were irrelevant, political questions relating to cases that are pending before the Constitutional Court, before the court. A criteria would prevent all of those issues, but the JSC perhaps does not seem to think that a criteria would assist, but as Judges Matter, our advice will always be that there needs to be a set criteria that is written down and that is known to everyone.
Let's look at the candidates themselves. I mean, you look at Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga as well as the Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who may not necessarily finish their term if they were to be appointed, because Madlanga's retirement is in 2025, and this is, of course, a year longer than the current Deputy Chief Justice. Could this have a bearing on the outcome? Because some argue that we need a Chief Justice that needs to serve out his full term and not what we saw in the past with Justice Ngobo leaving his position just after 2 years.
That's absolutely correct. So in terms of the Constitution, a judge can sit as a judge for a period of 12 years or until retirement age 70 years. And if you look at Justice Madlanga, as you've said, he is due to retire in 2025, and Justice Raymond Zondo is due to retire in 2024. So there is a very short period of time to have a person sit as a Chief Justice, especially considering the amount of work that a Chief Justice does. In 2 years' time, we can only assume that a Chief Justice will only be settling into office and will only be gaining momentum into the work that they're doing as a Chief Justice. But now, if they're going to be due to retire within that period of time, 2 or 3 years, that's a very short period of time. And it would mean that the JSC and the President have to now start the process of appointing a Chief Justice again, which is a very complex process, as we have seen, especially now that the President has decided to open it up. It is great that the President has opened the process up, but we've got 4 candidates, and it's going to be very difficult, I can imagine, for the President to decide who to appoint as a Chief Justice. And it wouldn't make any sense to have this process being undertaken again within 2 or 3 years.
And it's going to be interesting because these are very strong contenders when you look at their track record. I mean, you look at Justice Maya, for example, and, the work that she's done in the Supreme Court. But others may argue, because when you look at the law, seniority always becomes a factor. And some may say that as much as, gender, a gender balance here might be needed to have the first female, Chief Justice. But others are saying, given the fact that she's never been a permanent judge at that particular court and may then need to preside over some colleagues who have been there for quite some time and come with the seniority that is required, others may not see this as a good idea. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, some people might not see this as a good idea. But first of all, let me just say that, as you've said, we've never had a woman Chief Justice before. We've seen in our neighboring countries, Kenya, we have a woman Chief Justice, Martha Koome. We've got a woman Chief Justice in the Seychelles. But that is only a few women in Africa who are Chief Justices. It has never happened before. And yes, the fact that a person is a woman does not automatically qualify them to become the highest judge in South Africa. But it would not be the first time that a person in a senior position is overlooked for appointment as a Chief Justice. We saw that the former Chief Justice Mogoeng became a Chief Justice, but as we had the Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, who was the Deputy Chief Justice, who was ranking higher than the former Chief Justice Mogoeng. So although Justice Mandisa Maya will be coming from the Supreme Court of Appeal to the Constitutional Court, that should not be a factor. We should look at the qualities that she has if we're going to think if she were to be appointed as a Chief Justice. She has led the Supreme Court of Appeal very well since she was Deputy President in 2015 and the President of the SCA in 2017. She has done a great job during the pandemic, during the hard lockdown, in ensuring that the court runs properly. And she has ensured that there's collegiality in the Supreme Court of Appeal as well. So the fact that she is a woman, it would not be the only factor that counts in her favor.
Now, very briefly, talking about some of what may influence this particular process, I wonder if you think some of the politically charged cases that we saw being decided in the Gauteng High Court, whether or not they could play a role as far as Judge President Dunstan Mlambo is concerned, because others are saying that this might be a factor.
Yes, it might be a factor because he has sat in high-profile cases which are politically related, but that on its own should not disqualify him. Yes, it's a factor, but it's not a disqualifying factor.
Zikhona, I suspect that you and I are going to talk more about this as the week continues, because I tell you, we are not going to be doing anything else but watching these interviews. Thank you so much for your time. That is Zikhona Ndlebe, a researcher for Judges Matter.